Hey viewers, it's Dylan Nowak. If you're watching this video right now, you probably have seen some concepts from me either on Instagram, Twitter, or possibly at sportslogos.net forums. Today I'm finally making my tutorial for how I make my effects on this template made by SportsTemplates. If you go to his website, he's got a great selection of templates to choose from various sports. I know a lot of people complain about the pricing because most people who ask me for the template just want to make concepts for fun. Here's the deal: he spends so much time making these templates. He deserves the money. So maybe it's not for people who just want to do this as a hobby, but for people who actually want to get into graphic design, into sports design, this is a great template and worth every penny. Especially, it looks great in portfolios, and it's given me a lot of recognition online just for the quality of the template itself. So let's get started with the tutorial. So first things first with using this template, if you're here to just knock out a concept in like 20-30 minutes, you should probably not watch. This will take some time, and especially if you want to have a great quality concept that people are going to look at, and it not only shows the design, but it really represents what it's going to look like. Usually it takes about an hour and a half, depending on how intricate the design is that I'm working on, for me to finish a concept. So yeah, just a quick warning: it's not simple, it's not quick. But also, if you're watching this, if there's a quicker way for me to do something, I'm always looking to get better with Photoshop quicker. So if I'm doing something and there's a faster way to do it, just let me know. Next thing I want to talk about is what I'm showing you today isn't really suitable for doing a home and away jersey, mostly because I rasterized some layers just to make it simple for me. But keep in mind, if you want to do a home and away style jersey with the same design, make sure you try and keep the layers separate and group them. I'm just showing you, I guess, the basic ways of how to use this template. And right now on the screen, I'm showing you that when you use the layers that are purple on this template, you can easily just double click and really manipulate what the design looks like. However, I do not use that. I manually do the logos, the stripings on the arm, and even sometimes on the shoulder. The only time I ever use the purple quick select is for the socks, and if I have something on the shoulders that like a logo or numbers that I can't, because the shoulders is hard for me to warp. So anyways, let's get started with the logo. So I have the logo placed here, ready to go, and what I'm going to do is select each individual color and make it into its own layer. So I'm selecting the black, I'm selecting the orange, and I'm going to leave the white layer in the back. And I'm going to make them the 3 separate layers. I'm going to name them all, because when I'm doing this, a lot of times it can get really confusing. Right here, I'm changing the regular logo layer to all white, just so I'm positive that it's going to be just a complete white layer. Then what I start to do, and this is going to vary for colors, for logos, so there's not an exact number I use, but I go to bevel, try to make it small. You don't want to go too crazy to the point where it looks like it's this huge layer over one another. So right now I'm doing the orange, and as you can see, I'm just making it subtle, and then I'm adding a slight drop shadow, making the distance 0, and I'm making it very subtle. I think what people do wrong is they overdo the bevel and drop shadow. You got to make it subtle so it looks realistic. And what I'm doing here is I'm copying that layer style and adding it to the white and to the black layers on the logo. So that's how I get that effect that it's almost embossed, it's embroidered, that each thing has its own layer. So now we have the basic effect of the logo. See, if I click off the effects there, I can see what the logo actually looks like, and to me it's good to go. So what I'm going to do now is the stitching around the logo. If you press Command, and then click on the thumbnail of the outside of the logo, it'll select everything in that layer. Then, what you're going to want to do is make that into a vector path. And to do that, where right above the layer menu, to the right of it, there's a Paths little menu. If you go to the Paths menu, you can make it into a vector by going to the very bottom where the circle is, and the 4 points, and it'll make it into a vector. Then you have to make it into a shape, so go to the shape icon, go to path, and then click shape, and then you'll just have to make it no fill, no stroke color. on that. And then you're ready to go. You're ready to go to the type tool now. This is how you actually make the stitching. Go to the type tool, and if you hover over the path, you'll see the type tool turns into a little squiggly line. And if you click on the path, then you can start typing over the logo. Now, what I do to make the stitching is I just type a bunch of V's out. The font I typically use is Arial just because it's pretty typical, nothing really crazy on it. And then you're gonna change the kerning on it so that they're all overlapping each other just a little bit, and make it to a nice size. Not too big, not too small. You want it to be there so if people are really looking at the details of your design, they can see the stitching. But at the same time, you don't want it so big to the point where it's just unrealistic and it just looks fake. So what I do is just I tip a bunch of V's out, and then I just copy and paste it all around the logo until it's all covering it. So now we have the actual stitching. Looks kind of fake because the default color on this computer was black. So we got to go into the layer styles of this new type layer. You can rasterize it if you want, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to double click on the layer to bring up the layer styles, just like we've been doing with the bevel. And you're going to change it to whatever color the outside layer of the logo is. Obviously, you don't want it to be a different color, unless that's intentional. I'm going to zoom up here, and you're going to have to play around with this. The bevel is going to be super small. Really play around with it. Bring everything down to like 1 or 2. And this is really going to depend on the color of whatever the outside is. If it's like a dark blue or a black, you're going to need to bring it, you're going to actually have to make the color of the stitching a little lighter so it's more noticeable. And with whites, you can probably leave it to the same color because then the shadows of the drop shadow are going to really make it stick out with the bevel. And like I said, with a drop shadow, make it really small as well. You don't want it to be so obvious. So many people overdo the bevel and drop shadow. You just got to make it small, make it subtle. And basically that's the logo. You can do more stitching if you want to, but now what we're going to do is warp the logo. Like I said, I do everything manually, so you're going to go to warp, and what I do is I drag the top right down just inside a little bit and to the left. Just bring it down and bring the bottom right up just a little bit, and then take the side of the bounding box you have, right the edge, and bring it in just a little bit to meet back up, just so it has that little curve. Then you're going to come to the other side, the top left, drag it downward just a bit, and to the bottom left and drag it upwards a bit, and then again to the left side bounding box, drag that inside a little bit. Then what you're going to do is take the middle of the logo and just drag it outward just a bit to make it look like it's actually going over and it's rounded with the jersey. And then I just recenter it, just get it back into position just a little bit. And that's how I manually do the logo. It's going to take some practice, but overall, that's just how I do it. I think it's pretty simple now. You get the hang of it after a while. So now this next part is the part that really I think could be quicker, and it drags on a little bit. It's getting the effect off of the jersey so that the mesh isn't over the logo. So you're going to Command D select the logo area now so that the logo is selected, and then you're going to go into the layer folder and go through each layer of the effects. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. You're going to go to the effect group and go through each layer with the effect and give it a Gaussian blur of 5. So go to effects, blur, Gaussian blur, and then give it a 5 to each layer, and that will take it off of the actual jersey. So yeah, this is a part that, I mean, it really doesn't take that long. I mean, it'll take 30 seconds to click the layer and then just do effect Gaussian blur after you do it the first time. But yeah, this is the thing that, I mean, if there's a quicker way to do it, I would love to know. But I mean, overall, it's still not crazy long. It's not like, oh, I have to go through each layer. There's like 10 maybe. So, and redoing the Gaussian blur to 5 is just 2 clicks. You don't have to keep going to the blur, Gaussian blur. You can just do the quick select. But this will keep the lighting effect over the logo, but it will remove the mesh. Well, I mean, figuratively, it will remove the mesh. It's just blurring the mesh just a little bit. But the lighting is still there, which gives the effect that it's actually over the jersey. And that's why the drop shadow on the actual logo layer does a great job of giving it that depth. Then what we're going to do is go to Noise, effect noise, add noise, and then give it like a 10 or 11. And this gives it that different fabric feel to it, just so it looks like it's different from the jersey in general. And if you follow along the steps here, you should have a very nice looking logo on a jersey and having it look somewhat realistic. Next, I'm just going to show you how to do the sleeve stripes, and then well, striping in general. I'm just going to quickly do a hem stripe right here just to show you. I just do a shape, and then I warp it to an arc just slightly downward, and then I rotate it a little bit. That's how I normally do my hem stripes manually, just so I don't have to use the quick thing, because it's really simple, and it's a shape, and then you can really edit the stitching that goes around that. But I'm not going to do stitching with the hem today. Just to let you know, when I do hem stripes, I also get rid of the mesh over the striping. However, with the sleeves, there isn't that mesh texture that's on the sleeves. So when you're doing a sleeve stripe, you don't have to do that. So I'm going to show you how I go about doing sleeve stripes. So I'm just going to make just a striping pattern that I think would look nice on this jersey. I'm just going to go with just a typical 3-stripe. And again, this is the tip that if you're going to do a home and away jersey, this is where this really comes in, of keeping each layer separate, not rasterizing them, not bringing them together, because when you have to make another jersey or the away jersey, to redo this all over again would take so much more time, when you could just easily switch the color or change the color with the color overlay. So I'm going to be rasterizing them and condensing them just to make it really quick for me, but just keep in mind, when you're working on a concept with home and away, try your best to keep them separate and then group them, because then you can move them as a group. So with this, the bevel emboss, so for the logo, you're supposed to soften it up a little bit more. For this one, you want to keep them more harder and chiseled. Ooh, sexy. Just because striping on actual jerseys, they almost come off the jersey. They're like another layer of the jersey, and it's thinner, but it still has that depth though. So less soft, just smaller, and then you're gonna copy and paste that layer style to the black one. Then you can condense the colors to each other, and then just add a slight drop shadow. Again, nothing too crazy. And this is again where it comes into effect with color. Dark colors, it's gonna be tougher to see the bevel, so that you might want to bump up the white color, the highlight of that. You might want to decrease the shadow, but for lighter colors, it's going to be a little different, which again, it's really tough for me to give this tutorial and say, hey, do this, and it'll work out perfect every time, because no, it'll be different, unfortunately. So now we have basically the bevel system all worked out. Sorry, I'm messing up here. Completely messed up the stitching pattern. So 1 second while I fix this. So now, going to use the pen tool, which is big, very big with doing this concept, and you're going to make a line on the inside of a stripe, just below the stripe. No fill, and make the stroke 3. This is big. No fill, stroke 3. Then you're going to go into the stroke details and make it one of the dashed lines, and then go into more options and make the dash 2 and the gap 1. And then you're going to click on that layer and give it a slight bevel and drop shadow along that you've been doing with the stitching, and to give it that same effect. So that's just on top of the stripe there. And again, it's I know, stroke of 3, that's what I use every time. Dashed line with a dash of 2 and a gap of 1. Then again, do the same stitching effect that you did with the logo, and it should turn out fine. And so here's a better example of me zooming in. It's just a one straight line on top of the white stripe. You can see it better now. And I just make the color of the stroke white for this. And again, for the darker colors, you might have to change the color a little bit, just so you can see it more. But what I'm going to do then is duplicate that layer I just made and just move it down a little bit so it's at the bottom. So now you have stitching around the top and the bottom of that stripe. Then I'm going to merge those two layers together. Again, don't do this unless you're only doing one jersey, because then it's going to be a hassle to change all these colors or doing it a second time. Because if you rasterize it, then you can't really change the striping color. So then I'm going to move it down to the other white stripe, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. However, I'm going to do it to the black. But so again, for dark blues, blacks, make the stroke color a little bit lighter so you can actually tell that something is there. So, I mean, all in all, a lot of this is just playing around with bevel, drop shadow, playing along with the stroke and the stitching. The biggest tip I can give you is just don't overdo the bevel, don't overdo the stitching, drop shadow. Make everything pretty small, and this template is so big that you're gonna get a lot of detail. So the small drop shadow, it might not be, you might be looking at it and be like, oh, it's not doing that much. But if you zoom out and just take it all in, it's still doing its effect. It's making it look realistic. Don't overdo everything. Turn down the opacity if you have to for drop shadow or for the bevel. A lot of it is just really playing along and learning how to not overdo something and just giving it a realistic effect. I see too many times just in normal design, people overdo the bevel ridiculously just on like graphics with type. They want to give it that 3D effect, but then it just looks like some soft pudding. But right now, I'm taking the stripes now and I'm warping it down just a little bit how I did the hem stripe with that arc, and then I'm rotating it just a little bit just so it gives it more realistic, so it's not just straight. And then I'm placing it sort of midway, a little bit down. Then I'm going to duplicate the striping layer and put over here and rotate it upwards, because that arm looks like it's curved upwards a little bit, so I just give it a little bit of an upwards curve and move it up just a little bit. Then merge those two stripes together. Sorry, I'm changing the sleeve stripes here, they're not the same color. Then I'm going to go to the sleeve outline where the sleeve is. Command that and then go to the striping layer and give that a layer mask. So that way you can go back and edit where the sleeves striping are, but at the same time it's not going over. So basically I'm just going to talk the rest of the way. I don't really go into much more detail. For the numbers, do the same as the jersey. That's what I do. I do the beveling with each of the colors, and then I give it that stitch, the V stitching around. And again, everything is basically just learning how to use those layer options, and I guess in a way learning what works best for colors, what works best for different logos, because I know different logos look completely different with some striping and bevels, because a lot of logos will have a lot of detail to the point where you don't want so much bevel so it looks like it's a bunch of hills. Some logos might not have a lot of detail, so you might want to do a little bit more bevel to show that it is on its own layer. So I hope this helped a little bit. I'm sorry if I went a little bit quick. I didn't want this video to be 30 minutes long, because I know a lot of people are going to be pausing it and stopping. So again, this is just for arm striping, hem striping, logo details. And once you really start to get a hang of the details and stuff like that, using it on the shoulders and really manipulating how the template looks, you can really do a lot of things with the stitching effect. I know I do a lot of shoulder outlines with striping and making it have a stitch, and it looks great. So a lot of this is just learning Photoshop. If this doesn't help, just let me know. Message me on Instagram or Twitter, and I can totally give you a better understanding of what to do to my best ability. But yeah, again, I'm still learning, so I'm not the greatest teacher, but this is how I use the template, and I think it turns out nice. And I'm not spending like 2 or 3 hours on these concepts. They're about an hour and a half, and then maybe the 10 or 15 minutes working on presentation. So just let me know what you think about this tutorial, if it helped, if it didn't help, and feel free to send me some of your work, any questions, or if you just want to send me your concept before you post it, just to have a quick critique, that's fine with me as well. Again, everyone, I have to thank SportsTemplates for an amazing template he put out that really help push my concept making ability to the next level. I don't know if I should be bragging about that or being in shame that I have to say my concept ability is good. But yeah, it's an incredible template, and just a huge hobby of mine to do in the free time, and it just makes it that much more fun. So thank you for watching. If you made it this far, again, hoped it helped. And I can't wait to see all your concepts with this new technique. So thanks everyone for watching, and maybe I'll post some other design videos in the future. But for now, have a nice day.